Welcome, everybody. It is primary day, election 2018 in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm Josh Fenton. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Joining me today is State Representative John Lombardi, former mayor of Providence, municipal judge in the city of Providence, former city council president, former city councilman. Weren't you the ambassador to the Vatican at one point during your career?
I think some other mayor or something, but it's state representative.
Yeah, that's right, state representative. It is primary day, and we're starting to get the sense that this may not be exactly what we expected it to be. It is, going on 3 o'clock in Providence. It is raining at a good clip. Numbers coming out of a number of communities show very, very depressed voter turnout in this primary. And if it holds true, it could be record low turnout in the primary, despite the massive spend by Governor Raimondo. What's your take on no enthusiasm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely not. And this weather is certainly creating a pall on everything. I mean, look, Representative Regenberg has identified several voters over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Many progressives feel that, that their seats, out there ready to be taken. I think those people that are going to be voting for Representative Regenberg and some of in the local races, may opt to go with Brown. And I think that governor's race is tightening up. And obviously, she is probably going to spend about $2 million in the primary. Which is an inordinate amount of money, but it just may be enough, and it may not be enough to keep the gods off her.
It's unheard of. I mean, you take a look at it, we've functionally zero unemployment, whether it's a state economy or regional economy or national economy. An incumbent with $8 million total raised in the cycle. Zero unemployment, ought to be flying to re-election. Governor Baker in Massachusetts is being endorsed by half the Democratic mayors in the state, jumping over and endorsing a Republican. What's the disconnect here that Matt Brown, who hasn't really been in the state in a dozen years, and it hasn't raised any significant money? Gosh, there's probably reps who have more. There is.
Yes.
Joe Sicarchi's raised more money than Matt Brown.
That's correct.
What's the disconnect that she can't connect and he's able to pick up some momentum regardless of how this turns out?
Yeah, it just seems like people want change. If that's what it is, if he's an agent of change, she may not be. Don't forget, everybody forgets, she's been in office 8 years.
Yeah, right.
So she has an 8-year record. A lot of people forget that. And, with the term limits, which is only 8 years, the people that she hobnobs with, look, I support her, so I don't have a problem with that, but we need to be realistic. I don't know if she has the ground troops. I think, that progressive movement, I think is more for the regular guy or the regular woman. And I think that's what they're looking at. I mean, you saw, like what happened to General Assembly, especially on the House side, towards the end, with the women's issues and equal pay. I mean, people are very upset out there. They just want change. I went to a debate last night in my neighborhood. Many progressives, probably 125 people there. They're talking about change. They're talking about change. Now, if they get out there, if they get out to vote, I think you're going to see some you're going to see some surprises.
So some of the numbers we're getting, Pawtucket, as of about 11 o'clock this morning, only 1,600 people had voted in either the Democrat or the Republican primary. In contrast, in 2014, which wasn't the biggest turnout statewide primary year, 8,200. So even if you say that 11 o'clock a.m. and increase it by 1.5%, you're not even going to come close to the turnout in 2014. Are folks exhausted by politics? Is that part of this? This is unending Trumpism, unending conflict, lack of enthusiasm?
I mean, there's saturation. I mean, I was on my listening on my radio as I was coming over. I heard 3 gubernatorial commercials.
Yeah.
Spencer Dickinson. I mean, it's like, I think it's a little late, but
yeah,
and then we were inundated with mail. I mean, in the last 4 days, I probably received 13 pieces of mail. In some instances, 2 for the same candidate locally. So it's oversaturation. People are just going, you know what? If I think this is political, I'm throwing it in the garbage, and I'm just going, if I'm going to go vote. and this weather is not a great impetus to get out there.
Yeah, at least the numbers we're hearing, Pawtucket, Cumberland, low turnout, and Woonsocket, not good numbers for Dan McKee, who's counting on a big, big turnout in northern Rhode Island to offset Aaron Rugemer's.
Yeah. The Providence.
Let's go to your district. You were fortunate enough, or so unbeatable, that you did not attract an opponent in the Democratic primary. But overlapping your district is the Senate district that probably is the most contentious Senate district fight in this Democratic primary, or certainly one of them, and it's longtime incumbent Paul Jabbour against Audiello and Sam Bell. What's that race? They've all been on in the past, on GoLocal Live in the past week or so. What's that race looking like now?
Well, again, the weather's, I think, creating a little bit of havoc, but what we need to keep note of, Josh, is 529 mail ballots.
Yeah.
And I think, that race may come down to the mail, but I mean, from what we're seeing internally, and obviously I'm supporting Paul. Paul's a dear friend of mine. We're getting our identified voters out, our ones out. We want the turnout to be small. At the Twin Towers, I call Parentiville and Dominica Manor, there's about 440 votes and maybe about 220, 240 apiece.
Yeah.
So, and I figure there'll be like 320 maybe by the end of the day, so it'll be about 620, maybe 700. I don't know what Aaron Briggs is going to hold. Usually that's a very big poll, but I know they were less than the Twin Towers. But what was very high was the Water Supply Board. But you have the council race there, and you have the rep race there. That's very contentious.
And is that good news? Is that over at Water Supply? Is that good news for Paul Jabbour? Is that a worrisome note?
Well, I think that's good news because he has family there. I know he's worked Mount Pleasant very, very hard, probably harder than he worked Federal Hill proper. So I hope it's good news, but again, he's a hard worker. He worked every day, he walked every day, he never took his suit off. I used to tell him, Paul, you got to relax, but listen, he's a hard worker, he's dedicated to this, and he will prevail at the end of the day.
We ran a piece today of things to look at, maybe some of the facts that you didn't know. We talked about it a little earlier on air, Kate and I. In 1990, Bruce Sundlun beat Frank Flaherty and Joe Palina. Between the three of them, and they collected about 170,000 votes in that Democratic primary. So not only was it that core, probably 120,000 Democratic votes, but also about 50,000 independents came over and voted in there. We could have a vote this year under 100,000.
Absolutely.
Why are folks so dissatisfied?
They're desensitized, they're oversaturated. I mean, it's every word that you can think of. I mean, you're 100% correct, and some. It just, people are tired of it. A little bit of this, what's going on in Washington, this bickering back and forth, some of the things that are happening locally. I'm telling you, people are just saying, enough now. I don't want to hear it. You guys are all crooks. I mean, I got to tell you, I must receive 15 to 20 calls a week. I mean, I see it on my TV. Guess what? If it's anything I don't recognize, I'm never going to pick it up. Same thing on my cell phone. And I'm sure you're going through the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all are. And it's too much. It's redundant, over redundant, plus redundant. So it's going to stop.
Redundant at infinity.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump over to the GOP side. Alan Fung was expected to win this primary, but again, low turnout. Looking at some data, in 1992, the heavily favored J. Michael Levesque, who was the sitting mayor of West Warwick at the time when they had a mayoral structure. He had been GOP chairman. Very well liked, affable guy, had good relationships within the party. He gets upset. He only gets 6,000 votes in the Republican primary, gets upset by Betty Leonard, who owned a car dealership in Rhode Island. She only gets about 8,000 votes, less than 15,000 votes cast. Are we looking at the potential of an extremely low GOP turnout, in part because sitting on the sideline is Joe Trillo, who's got a basket of Trump voters with him, and he's holding them for the general election. Are we going to see a very significant depressed Republican turnout as well?
Oh, absolutely. Again, the weather. I would say that the Republican voter, you know, maybe people that are a little older, you know, a little more secure in their life, in the sense of, you know, they're a little conservative. You know, and this weather, again, they may be hit over the head with the club too many times. I mean, leave us alone. And you're right. I mean, this. And by the way, I don't count Pat Morgan out.
No.
I think that she put some rubber on the road. And
the last couple of weeks, I didn't think she ran the best campaign over the last year. But she had the best 2 weeks closing of any of the candidates in the entire state. She de facto created a perception that she got endorsed by Arlene Violet, Ken Block, and John Robitaille, all pretty popular people amongst Republican primary voters. Now, I think only Arlene Violet actually endorsed her, but the perception was all these different investigations that she was going to take on once she becomes governor, that she had announced that would involve all these folks. And I think she got a lot of momentum out of it.
I totally agree. She would receive an endorsement from South Carolina, John Robitaille.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I mean, that's the long arm of the law. I mean, no, seriously.
He's more worried about the hurricane than he is about the Republican primary here in Rhode Island.
Absolutely, but you never know. You never know, right? But yeah, and you know, there's another X factor in the general election. That's Dr. Nunes. I think he's going to get some votes. I mean, I met him last. I could be dead wrong, but I think there'll be some ethnic voting for him, and again, people that want change. I think that, you know, if it's you know, Patricia Morgan, Brown, Trillo, and him, you know, he may not do too bad. Yeah.
No, listen, it's going to be another wild card. Let's go to the Providence mayoral race. Listen, you look long and hard at running for mayor of Providence. You've run in the past. You held the position as mayor on the interim basis after Buddy Cianci was forced to resign, and held the position until there was a special election. Your polling by Zogby pointed out that sitting mayor Jorge Elorza has some weaknesses in some core areas, especially amongst, and interesting, Latino voters. Let's first talk about the primary and then talk about the general. In the primary, we've had Bob DeRobio, who's a well-respected educator, but wasn't a high-energy candidate for mayor, and Kobe Dennis, who was a high-energy candidate but had no infrastructure and couldn't raise any money. Do those two... You're anticipating Jorge Elorza to win the primary today. Do those two put any nicks in his armor that sets up problems for him in the general?
I heard someone texted me today. They said that Bob DeRobio had 2,400 mail ballots. Well, if he's got 2,400 mail ballots out of, say, a possible 5,000, and you know, those two gentlemen together get, let's say, 42, 43% of the vote. Well, that may spell a little problem for the incumbent. And then, you know, obviously we're going to talk about the general election. But so, I mean, the problem with the mayor is that he does not communicate well. It's his way or the highway. You know, and he's not like he goes to events now. He never has a tie on, never has a sport coat. Never, you know, he's got his shirt sleeves rolled up. I don't know what that is. I think, you know, certain events you need to be dressed up, dressed apart. Be the mayor, you need to be the, you know, the executive branch of government, and you know, he does not speak out on issues. When there's a crisis, he's hiding. I don't know why. He does not work well with the Providence delegation. I could tell you that as a state representative. So I don't know where he's going, but let's have this conversation at 8:01 tonight. I think we'll have a better view. Idea. I mean, if he wins 70% of the vote, then you know, it may be irrelevant.
Dee Dee Whitman jumped in at the very last second. Well known, especially on the East Side, prominent in the East Side Jewish community. Well known amongst politicos. She's been a tremendous fundraiser for a host of different candidates on the Democratic and even Republican side.
And independent.
And independent. Well known, well liked, well respected. She's tough. She's feisty. And she's thrown $500,000 on the table, and reports are that some significant players are looking to raise her some money. So she's going to flatten things out relative to, you've seen the polling, you're as involved as any elected official is in the community. Is that a race?
Well, it could be. Again, I think after tonight you'll see if I mean, if the mayor, happens to win big and, embraces Bob DeRobio, embraces Kobe Bryant, Kobe Dennis rather, and, it may be fait accompli. I mean, I think that's the problem with Dee Dee. How is she going to play in the minority community?
Yeah.
We don't know. We just
Right.
don't know. Does she have any ties to that community? I mean, we know she'll do well on the east side. She'll do well with women voters. I just don't know about the minority, and that's the big X factor for me.
Up at the State House, Maura Walsh is tweeting today that Speaker Mattiello has his entire staff working up on Smith Hill, trying to defeat her. They've put a lot of time, energy, and some money behind Michael Earnhardt, who she claims is a Trump 2.0 type of candidate. What's going to happen up there? You go back 2 years ago, she upset Tommy Pelangio. Tommy Pelangio had not really campaigned. He'd been sick. It was a very, very low turnout. I want to say 600 total votes.
Just about, that's right.
Yeah. And what do you see going on up there?
Well, I mean, I happen to like Representative Walsh. I think she's a straight shooter. She's not afraid to say what's on her mind.
No, that is definitely true.
That's I think she pulled some scabs off and kind of hurt. But no, it wouldn't surprise me that she's not a yes person. She's not anybody's person other than the people of her district. I know she's working very hard. She's indicated to me that she's identified several hundred ones. Ones
Yeah.
are people are going to tend to vote for her. I think there's about 170 to 200 mail ballots. I think she's saying she's doing very well with them. I mean, if that's true. And I know how hard she works. I think she'll prevail. But you're right. I mean, the last time, I think she won by 40 votes, 50 votes. There was about 600 votes that were cast. So,
right.
I mean, that tells you that they must have voted less than 10% there.
Yeah.
Now, with this weather, I think it helps her.
Yeah, right. It's really who can go and drag folks out.
Sure.
We've both been involved in races in the city that have big turnouts and small turnouts.
Sure.
And
Sure.
some of them catch fire, and you don't have to worry about getting anybody out. You just need to get a majority of them.
Sure.
The speaker's been under criticism, especially by progressives. Maura Walsh maybe being the most frenetic. I mean, the day doesn't go by that she's not tweaking the Speaker of the House with a tweet of some kind. Are we going to see a more complex leadership battle as the session begins? He's got a very tough race. He only beat Steve Frias 2 years ago by 85 votes. And paper ballots were the key to that. He's lost some of those key people. Jeff Britt's no longer with them. The unions have said they're not going to support him the way they did because of his lack of help on the POSOX deal. First of all, let's go with part one. Does he beat Steve Frias?
That's a good call. I know his supporters are saying that they don't need the mail ballots, that they're going to win. There's no Trump factor this time. There's less voters. He's identified his votes. He feels he can get them out. You're right though. I mean, there are some bad feelings amongst his group. And some of his operatives are not with him. I'm not saying they're opposed to him. I don't know that, but they're certainly not with him. And is there some jockeying going on? The answer is yes, but it's so undercover that you need James Bond to find it. So.
We see some of the.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we see some of them just going down to Circe for lunch sometimes. So,
exactly,
yeah.
I'm sure.
You in the past have expressed interest in being Speaker of the House. I don't think that's any secret. I think that's been uttered publicly in the past few years.
People have asked me. They've asked me a majority leader. I mean, look. I think we could span the bridges in there if we had a different kind of leadership. But look, it's all about rule changes. It's all about, maybe term limits. I mean, but people about communicating with them. You make a commitment. So, for example, my friend Carol McEntee, there was a commitment made to her. Last minute, it was pulled. You know, equal pay, and you know, and the equal pay was one for Donovan, and for Carol McAtee was the, you know, extending the statute of limitations with regard
On
to
sexual abuse,
sexual
which
abuse,
has
yeah.
subsequently become a national issue with the
Amen.
grand jury
It's
report
it's like
coming out
hashtag
of.
Me Too.
Yeah,
It's a it's a world issue. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
a national, it's world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, the Pope is being criticized. Even our own bishop is taking a shot at the Pope. So it's a big issue. And you know what? You make the commitment, you have to keep your commitment. That's what leadership does. Apparently, it's, you know, it's, again, their way or the highway. And you're hearing people that are in chair positions, especially many of the women reps in the room, saying, we don't care about the chairmanship, or we don't care about the title that we have. Now, again, let's talk January 1.
Yeah, that's right, right. When the
You know how
actual
that works.
votes, right,
Yeah.
right. There's usually more voted commitments than there are actually members of the House of
And
Representatives.
that's, I mean, you know,
Right.
there is rumor that, you know, at least one person wants to run for a speaker against them. You know, until that happens, then we'll see.
Let's wrap up. Will we see a big surprise? Will Matt Brown beat Gina Raimondo? Will Aaron Ruggenberg beat Dan McKee? Will Patricia Morgan beat Fung? Are we now headed in a direction with this weather, with this low turnout, that any of those things could happen?
Well, there's the conventional way of thinking that would say you're absolutely wrong on all three.
Yeah.
That all three will lose. However, if the progressives have done what they claim they've been trying to do for the past 2 years, if you believe what happened with Capuano and the councilwoman from
Yeah.
Boston, I mean, that was very telling.
Right.
If that's the way...
Capuano was
yeah.
up 13
Exactly.
points 3 weeks beforehand, and it wasn't close.
No.
No, he got beat.
But
hands
here's the
down.
thing. I think people are so disgusted that they're on a line to try and skew the polls. And you know what, you can't blame them, because again, every 5 minutes you're getting a call. And then you're watching TV, there's 4 Gina Raimondo commercials, you know, 1 Matt Brown, you know, Regenberg, you know. So it's,
Well, if we're comparing Gina Raimondo and Matt Brown's, there's 27
Well,
Gina
that's
Raimondos
true.
and 1
I'm
Matt
sorry,
Brown.
I
Yeah.
stand corrected, maybe 30.
Yeah, that's right.
But so nothing would surprise me either way. If the 3 win, it wouldn't surprise. If the 3 lose, it wouldn't surprise me. And again, I'm saying that the turnout's going to be so low, I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference.
I will say this, though, probably the biggest surprise of the entire campaign is how traditional a race Gina Raimondo's campaign has run. It has been a TV-oriented, old-school race. We really haven't seen that. You know, Obama sort of shattered that model going back in '08, going very digital, especially email strategy. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton with a Facebook strategy driven. Sure. And now we've kind of gone back. Gina Raimondo's campaign is buying 30-second spots on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and trying to lock in that older TV,
Sure.
you know, very stable 65
those
plus
are the people
voters.
that vote.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're, and I'm saying that's where the progressives may benefit, that the weather being so inclement, that many of those people may not leave. You know,
Yeah.
who's got arthritis, who's, you know, whatever.
Right.
They just may not come out.
I want to thank you for coming on.
Well, the pleasure's all
and,
mine, sir.
look forward to hearing your comments a little later this evening. We'll be reaching out to you. It has been wild and woolly all day. The text messages have been blowing up by the second. I'm going to be right back in about 30 seconds with former Congressman Bob Wagan. He's a unique person who has the perspective of both serving up in the leadership in the State House as well as serving in Congress, and ran for United States Senate. So we'll be right back in about 30 seconds with Congressman Wagan. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the quick pause. I'm Josh Fenton. We're at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. It is primary day, rainy primary day, and with me is former United States Congressman Bob Wagan. I got to know Bob Wagan probably in the early 1990s, late 1980s, when you were a state representative from East Providence, Rhode Island, Corporations Committee.
You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you had it all going on.
It was a good time.
We're in the midst of, clearly in both our lifetimes, the most disruptive political period that we've ever seen at the federal level. But today, emerging in Rhode Island, it looks like a very disruptive day. We'll see how it turns out, but we're getting some numbers of amazingly compressed turnout in some of the communities. Hard numbers we're getting out of Northern Rhode Island are people just aren't coming out to vote.
I saw that this morning where I was voting, and there was nobody there other than me.
Yeah,
and I heard from my wife, and I've heard from my children. They said the same thing, that it's been very, very low.
The east side has been okay. Nathan Bishop Middle School, which is where the beautiful people vote, and they've had a good turnout. There's a lot of contested state senate and city council and representative races. But if you go just a couple blocks over to Martin Luther King Elementary School, which is usually a pretty vibrant voting area, was in the ward that I represented, there was literally not a voter in the building for half an hour.
If you take a look historically, when we have these bad weather days like this, and you have unmotivated voters, the turnout can be low overall. But then within that, there could be a segment of very agitated, angry, motivated voters who come in and have a major impact on the election. And we've seen that. You and I have seen that over the decades.
So who does this benefit? We've got a compressed voters. I'm going to go governor's race because I think literally the eyes of the country may be on this race if it turns out to be as close as it could potentially be. Gina Raimondo, governor, first female governor, functionally zero unemployment in the state of Rhode Island, right? Everybody who wants a job can get three of them.
Maybe not at the best wage, but they can get them.
Absolutely, but full employment.
Yep.
There are cranes in the sky, whether it was the best expenditure of money and who got it, but whatever it is, there's cranes in the sky. And she's got $8 million. She's in a dogfight for a guy that functionally none of us have seen in a decade. Left Rhode Island around 2006 after a tough campaign, failed campaign for United States Senate. He came back in, popped up one, I want to say May Day. He walked in here the day he uttered the words. We had him on. He's run a solid campaign, but hasn't raised any significant money.
And hasn't advertised on the traditional TV, even radio. There's very little whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most pundits right now at 3:30 in the afternoon on primary day would bet that this is a toss-up race, and the governor's in a little bit of heat.
I heard some internal polling 2 weeks ago within the governor's own folks. This was September 1st, excuse me, and they indicated that it was a 42-38 race. And I was saying to myself, how could it be this close with all the advertisement, all the positive impacts, economic development, as you said, low unemployment rate, all of these things. And you start beginning to analyze, is there a certain kind of bad aura about what the governor has been doing with people? Is it about UHIP?
Yeah.
Is it about cooler and warmer? Is it about a certain degree of lack of arrogance with regard to transparency?
Yeah.
Are they all very negative? And when we saw this last, I think you all remember 1994.
Yeah. Or 90.
90, but even in 1994, when Bruce Sunland, the incumbent governor, was running against Mirth York. Now, Mirth had far more money to put into traditional advertising. But what happened in that race was a big surprise.
And Lake Allman upsetting Ron Makeley. Going away. I mean, very few people saw that.
One of the highest voter turnout for Republican primaries we've had.
Yeah.
Although, you know when the highest one? When was the highest one?
Laffey, Chafee, 34,000 to 29,000 in that primary.
Yeah.
And, you know.
In the lieutenant governor's race in 1996, King against Reggie Centracchio. And it was 55,000 came out in that race. Yet, as you mentioned earlier about Mike Levesque and Betty Leonard.
Poor Mike Levesque.
He had 6,000 votes and she had 7,500 votes. It was the lowest that we've ever seen.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I think there were more people voted in my city council race in
Right.
1990 than voted for Mike Levesque statewide in the Republican primary.
And in that race, it wasn't a matter of that they disliked Mike
No.
or they disliked Betty. It was just that there was no motivation to go out because no one really cared. In this race, though, I think that many people are either very upset and they're coming out to as a negative vote against the governor. And Matt Brown has just keyed in on that. It could have been Matt Jones, I think, and they could have done the same kind of thing.
Is it an ABG? Is it an anybody but Gina vote?
I've heard that a lot from my friends that are dyed-in-the-wool Democratic strong voters all the time, saying, I just am very upset with the way she's handled things. And now, I think her ads have been very good. I hear other friends of mine say they despise them. So you're either on one side or the other. But when I heard this poll 2 weeks ago, 2 days later was the first drop of the negative ad against Matt Brown,
right.
the black
Absolutely.
and white.
Yep.
And I think it was because they recognized that the vote was very, very close in the race, and they needed to go negative. You and I know that there may be 38% for Matt Brown, 42% for her, but there's 20% that's undecided. And the negative advertising impacts those people.
Yeah, she's really going after. But I think the worry is, listen, you've known Gina Raimondo. She, as general treasurer for 4 years, was almost a governor level. Right. She oversaw one of the most important pieces of legislation, whether you like it or don't like it, whether she implemented it fairly or didn't. Pension reform was a lightning rod issue. So she was almost governor for 4 years. Then she's been governor for 4 years. Is there a little exhaustion of
fatigue
of the governor?
There could be, but I think they also, many people expected her to be more of a leader on certain kinds of issues. Like it or not, the Pawtucket Red Sox deal hurt her with the building trades and other kinds of businesses and people in Pawtucket and Blackstone Valley. Whether you agree with it or not, it hurt her. Either she should have led to say no, be very firm about it, or say yes and really bring everybody together, which she didn't do.
I think the dysfunctionality of the relationship between the two legislative leaders and the governor, Ruggiero, the governor, and Mattiello, that the fact that the three of them could never literally get in a room together any one time and meet with the Pawtucket Red Sox leadership and put forth what the state's best offer was. Now, listen, editorially,
and in Woonsocket, they did that.
That's
how Worcester. They did that.
In Worcester,
in
absolutely.
Worcester, they brought everybody together, including the lieutenant governor, who represented the state and the governor. And they came together very quickly, and they offered a better financial deal.
An insane financial deal, some
absolutely.
would say.
Many people say that it's going to go down in the tubes. But they put together a deal. So with regard to her leadership, some people are questioning that. With regard to other issues that have come up that have been stumbles along the way, some people have said that. But I think that what really happens is people are upset with her for various different kinds of reasons. There are other people that are really supportive of her. This weather that we see out here today could be the damage. If there's only 85, 90,000 people come out, this could be a nail-biter of a race. If it's back up to the normal 110, 120, we'll never see the 170 for the Sunland 1990 race. But if it's 110, I think she wins. She has all the traditional tools in place, the money, the advertising. She's got the GOTV, the people getting out to vote, that type of thing. Aaron Regenberg, on the other hand, is actually helping Matt Brown.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, Aaron Regenberg for the last 2 years has not worked. He's been a legislator up at the General Assembly, and he has spent getting ready for this race all his time IDing voters who were Sanders folks, liberal leading, environmentalist, all the constituency.
A contemporary campaign, too.
Absolutely.
A very contemporary. Now, can you get those younger generation voters out today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know the answer, but that's going to be the deciding factor to this race. You know, one thing we were looking at in numbers, Bernie Sanders 2 years ago in the May presidential primary got 63,000 votes. So there's a core of 63,000 that have, are predisposed to vote for a very knowingly progressive candidate. Hillary Clinton in in that race only got 53,000, almost the exact number as Gina Raimondo in the Democratic primary in 2004.
With Angel Tavares and Clay Pell.
And Clay Pell, where she got about 42% of the vote. So
if Regenberg and to the same degree Brown can capitalize on that 63,000 Sanders voters coming out, it will overwhelmingly take control of the 90 to 100,000 potential Democratic primary voters.
Absolutely, and if I'm Dan McKee, even more so than Gina Raimondo right now, I'm extremely worried about the numbers we're seeing coming out of northern Rhode Island.
In Blackstone Valley.
Yeah, absolutely, which he needed to ring the bell. At 12 noon, only 10% of eligible voters had voted in Cumberland. 1,800 people at 11 a.m. had voted in Pawtucket. They're on pace to do about 5,000 votes versus 8,200 in the gubernatorial in 14.
Dan McKee has a strong contingent of people out there working for him and helping him. Remember, he had a big race against Ralph Mollis the last time around. He only got, I think, 43. Right, he only got 43% of the vote in the primary. So he's got a race ahead of him, but he's more mature about it now. He's got his GOTV going. I'm just fascinated by the Regenberg-Brown potential, what they can do with regard to Gina Raimondo. I've never seen a campaign so much like this.
We've never seen it anything like this in the last 30, 40 years.
So for those of us that are out of politics, it's enjoyable to watch.
Oh, it's the best.
If you're in that position of Gina Raimondo or Matt Brown, you're biting your nails and you're wondering, what else can I do today?
Well, I will tell you, I won't say who I had. I had a spirited conversation last week with a high-ranking member of the Raimondo administration who was complaining about a couple of articles, and I said, and he was complaining that I didn't want to see Governor Raimondo reelected. I said, absolutely not. I said, Governor Raimondo is a lot like Buddy Cianci, very divisive. You put Raimondo in the headline, just like you put Buddy Cianci in before he passed away, people read the story.
Absolutely.
And they read it because they like her, or they read it because they can't stand her. But she
gets the coverage.
Absolutely. It's Donald Trump for the New York Times, right? They don't want Mike Pence to be president of the United States. They want Donald Trump to be in chaos for the next 6 years if you want to keep that business model. But it's going to be a very, very interesting evening tonight. We've got a slew of people. Link Chafee's coming in tonight, as well as a number of the leading professors, Val Endres over at Rick, and Michael Graham, the national talk show host, conservative talk show host, is Skyping in. So I think we've got a good lineup, about 10 different folks. Tell me about what you're doing now in the post-URI world.
I'm actually vice president for a new upstart college called College Unbound.
Oh, I know College Unbound, absolutely.
In Providence with Dennis Glitke.
Absolutely.
And also my good friend and colleague Bob Carruthers is there as well. We're working to bring about a very important and vibrant institution, College Unbound. And we're doing so. We're working through the accreditation process. We're doing all those things to get going. It services a community that needs to be helped in many different ways.
Absolutely.
Our school is primarily for those who have started college, dropped out for whatever reason. Most of our students are female, of color, and they're relatively poor.
Yeah.
And we're getting them back into college courses to get college credit to eventually earn their bachelor's degree.
Dennis Glitke, if you don't know who he is literally considered one of the biggest innovators in education in the United States.
He's vibrant, he's dynamic, he never stops. He's working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. He's inspiring to me to see the work that he's doing, but probably more inspiring is when I see the faces of these students who are saying, I've got a chance to finish my degree.
Yeah.
I can go back to school now and I can get a bachelor's degree and raise myself up. And there's nothing like it. It is an inspiring experience, and we have a wonderful school, College Unbound, and we just want to keep this going.
And Bob Carruthers is one of the most, longtime URI president, one of the most decent people
Really is.
You'd ever
He's a
meet.
dear friend, and ever since he came here to Rhode Island, and his heart is deeply into this. He was the board chair for a while. Now he's executive VP for College Unbound. And it's a great experience.
That's great. Tell me, what would be the biggest upset tonight? Is it Matt Brown beating Gina Raimondo? Is it Patricia Morgan upsetting Alan Fung? Is it a clean sweep where we see Ruggenberg and Brown?
I think it's going to be very close between Alan Fung and Patricia Morgan. I would not doubt whatsoever that she ends up pulling it out at the last moment because of the low voter turnout, almost like an Elizabeth Leonard kind of race in '92. I still think that Gina Raimondo wins.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be closer than what she would like it to be.
Right.
And I do believe Dan McKee wins, and it'll be closer than he would like it to be. The progressives, I think, on the statewide races will not be as successful as they think. I do believe, though, on local races, state representative and senator races, I think you're going to see far more progressives moving into the General Assembly seats, which for the Speaker of the House, whoever that may be, whether it's Nick Mattiello or Joe Sacaccio, they're going to be a different world out there in the General Assembly.
Yeah, I think we're going into a new era. I agree with you that I think as of right now, you've got to continue to bet on Gina Raimondo.
I think so.
She's got the incumbency, she's got the organization, etc. She wishes that John Giorgi had done her better on the weather. I think that
Mark Searle or whoever it may be.
That's right.
You're dating yourself.
He's our weather.
I know he is.
Patricia Morgan Fung, I think that's a toss-up right now as of 3:45. And
again, it's voter turnout. In that race, if that voter turnout is only 15 to 20,000 votes versus 40 or 50 that it could be, I think Alan has a problem. Alan Fung, I think, though, did not get out there and put a spark into his campaign as much as she did.
Yeah, I think he got some bad advice, and I think he took some bad advice in that fear of being labeled with Trump sort of curtailed him taking positions on so many things that it sort of morphed into melancholy a little bit. It was very,
people
very
can
hard.
fall asleep as a result of that and not be active voters.
And it's different from where he was 4 years ago, where he just seemed to be out there more and more and more and high energy. And he's a very likable guy.
He is.
I think when he's been on, I don't know, a dozen times probably. Literally when he parks the car and walks over, 5-10 people just walk up and shake his hand and hug him, kind of thing. So I think he's got that personality and the affableness. He's got to break out. If he wins this primary, he really needs to let the Alan Fung show against whomever the Democrat is.
And whoever the Democrat is and the Republican, they're still going to be looking at Joe Trillo.
Yeah, that's right.
And Joe Trillo is the wild card in all this. Can he only garner up 6 or 8%, or does he become a Bob Healy with 20 or 21% of the vote? Becomes the spoiler for whoever eventually becomes out to be governor.
In our John Della Volpe poll in June, he had him tracking about, depending on the matchups, about 12 to 16% of the vote. I think he holds, there's a core Trump-Trillo legacy of around 12-14%.
I agree
think
with
that
you.
hurts the Republican. I want to thank you so much. It was great to see you.
My pleasure.
Listen, we're going to be back in just a little while. Things are breaking already today on primary day. We'll be loaded up from 7 o'clock on into the night with about 10 different guests tonight, as well as some folks Skyping in nationally. Coming up at 4 o'clock is Kate Nagel. She's got Jennifer Lawless, everybody's favorite political scientist, as well as Spencer Sullivan down in D.C., Republican consultant. We'll see you back at 4 o'clock. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great.